So it's 2021 now, and you might be thinking, I'm going to buy a camera. I'm going to buy my first camera. That's a really big decision. It's a lot of money to spend, and I'm here to help you make the right decision. Because today, in this video, we are talking about the Canon EOS M50 and why I still think it is a viable and very, very good camera for 2021. Let's roll the intro. What's going on, guys? Connor Wells here. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you very, very much for joining me for another video. And like I said in the intro, today we're talking about the Canon EOS M50. This is Canon's first ever 4K mirrorless camera. And I'm going to be going over some of the pros and cons of this camera and why I still think it is a great camera for 2021. Now, this camera, I guess, for these days in technology, it is pretty old. It's an old camera. It came out in 2018, March 2018. So yeah. Quite an old camera. It's a few years old now. We're in 2021, but that doesn't change the fact that it's still a very, very good camera. Yes, it's got its pros, but also it has its cons. And just for reference, I'm currently filming on a Canon EOS M50 with the kit lens as well. So take that into account. This is on the kit lens. Doesn't look too bad, does it? Let's start with some pros. So the pros. This camera has got a lot of them. Let's be honest. This camera has, I'd say, in my opinion, the pros outweigh the cons. It's not a surprise, really. This is still Canon's best-selling interchangeable lens camera. It's no surprise. It's a great camera. I've got two of them. Let's go with the pros. It has a flip-out screen. This is so handy. One, for vlogging, it's great so you can see yourself. I mean, usually I'm filming on a switch pod. I've got my switch pod somewhere, but it's great for vlogging. And that flip out screen is very handy. I'm currently using it right now, so I can see myself in the monitor. It's great, you know, and as well, not just for video, for photography as well. If you want to, you know, get like a nice sort of high up shot and you're looking up like that, that's great. If you want those low down shots, you can tilt the screen up and you can look down. It's great. Love a good flip out screen. I'd be lost without one. This camera, when filming in 1080p, has great autofocus. This is embedded with Canon's dual pixel autofocus, and from my experience, Canon's dual pixel autofocus is the best autofocus system on the market today. Another great feature in the pros list is it has a mic input. There are quite a few Canon EOS M cameras that don't have a mic input, like the EOS M200 or M100, I believe, which sucks because if you're doing video, the onboard camera microphone, it's not the best, but the fact that you can plug any sort of microphone into this is amazing. Love that. Love that a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, it has interchangeable lenses. This is far more than just your standard point and shoot camera with the one fixed lens. No, you can remove the lenses. Now, it is great that you have the versatility to switch up your lenses. Like I said earlier, I'm currently filming with the kit lens, which is the 15 to 45. It's not too bad. I rarely use it, but for the sake of talking about Canon M50s, I thought I'd film this with the kit lens. So it's great that you have the option to change your lenses. This camera isn't just for video, it takes great photos as well. This is fitted with a 24.1 megapixel sensor and it takes brilliant photos. As you can see from the ones on display right now, these are all photos that I've taken with the Canon M50. This is what I use for my client work. Yes, I am upgrading later this year to some new cameras and new lenses, but that doesn't default from the fact that this camera still takes great still images, whether you're shooting in manual or auto. You should be shooting in manual. This camera is tiny. It has a very, very small form factor. When you look at this without a lens on, it is tiny, absolutely thin. And the fact it has a flash, which I never really use, and it has an EVF, it's great. It's so small and compact. I can fit two of these in my camera bag, and that's even in my small camera bag as well. Yeah, the small form factor is nice and lightweight. It can fit on the DJI Ronin SC, which I've got in the back over there. It's such a good form factor for cameras. And my last pro, it has a very uncomplicated layout. The menu system is so easy. Like, everything is on display there. It's a touch screen. You can drag and dial everything in. You've got drag focus if you don't want to use manual focus. Obviously, you've got the autofocus, but the menu layout is just so easy to use compared to someone like Sony menus, which have always been notoriously very, very complicated. But this is just so simple. You've got everything there on display. You've got If you go into the info mode, easy to understand, even if you're like a novice to camera using. The buttons are all very, very customizable as well. It's so easy to use. This is why whenever someone says, what camera do I get? I always recommend the Canon EOS M50. This camera does have some cons, and we're going to dive into those cons now. Now, this one isn't really too much of a complaint for me. I think on a body this small, it would be a little bit overkill, and I think for the price of it, I think that would be too good to be true. But this camera does not have IBIS. If you don't know what IBIS is, that stands for in-body image stabilization, which means the sensor is stabilized as well as the lens is being stabilized. So the footage is always going to be really, really smooth unless you're shaking it about like that, but I would not recommend that. For me, this not having IBIS isn't really a deal breaker. I usually stick it on a gimbal anyway, and the fact that this is a £600 camera with the kit lens, I don't really see that as a con, to be honest. You know, some people may need that IBIS, but for me, I'm used to using it now, and it's not too much of a con, particularly at the price point. Now, the biggest con of this camera, Canon throwing down the cripple hammer on this camera, is the 4K footage. Now, I'm going to go full disclosure, I am shooting this in 4K. I'm shooting it in manual focus because the 4K loses the dual pixel autofocus. It switches to a contrast-based autofocus, so the focus always hunts and will often go out of focus. It's not reliable, the 4K, and the real downside as well is it's cropped. The Canon M50 has an APS-C sensor which has a 1.6 times crop. So if you're shooting on the kit lens at 15, in reality you're actually shooting at about 24mm. So always take that into account. But when you're shooting in 4K, it adds another crop as well. So my camera is quite far back, you know, I can't even touch it. This is my arm fully stretched out and I cannot even reach it. So you have to move the camera back if you're going to shoot in 4K, and you have to use manual focus as well. So that's a pretty bad con, really. Now, this camera does have some sort of slow motion capabilities. You have 1080p up to 60 frames a second, which is great. This is what I've been using, you know, for the last 2 years shooting on this camera. It doesn't have 120 FPS. Well, actually, wait, it does, but in 720p. So in reality, it doesn't, because who shoots in 720p these days? I don't. I would never shoot in 720p. The quality and resolution just isn't good enough for 2021. For me, 60 FPS is good enough for the stuff that I shoot, but if you do need 120 frames per second, this probably isn't the camera for you. So that wraps up my analysis of the pros and cons of the Canon M50. But to answer the title of this video, is the Canon M50 still viable in 2021? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I would recommend this camera to anyone who's looking to get their first camera for 2021. Pros by far outweigh the cons. It is such a user-friendly camera. The fact that you've got a flip-out screen, great video quality in 1080p, 4K isn't fully mainstream yet. I think this year, towards the end of the year, it may start to be. But if you just need to shoot videos in 1080p, this is the camera for you. It takes great stills, it takes great video, and it's very, very user-friendly. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you got some value out of it. Don't forget to hit that like button and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And if we're just meeting, my name is Connor Wells. I'm a freelance photographer, videographer, and podcast producer. If you want to see my portfolio and check out my Lightroom presets, please head over to connorwells.com and you can see all of that there. That would be much appreciated if you check that out. Until then, see you guys in the next video. Stay safe and have a great day. Peace.